I think most people just live life unintentionally. They don't think about what they're doing. They don't ask themselves what is the ultimate goal or the objective. If you're unintentional about your life, you're going to live a non-extraordinary life. But when you become intentional about it, then you can drive the outcome.
No, that's a great lesson.
Anthony Pompliano,
founder and CEO of Professional Capital Management.
He's a former veteran.
And the writer of the Pomp letter.
We live in a world where everyone wants to be nice to each other and no one wants to offend each other. But if you actually go and you are around the most successful people in the world, they all offend each other on purpose. I spent 6.5 years in the military. One of the things about the military is it's all about what you do for yourself is actually what you're doing for everybody else.
You went to Facebook. You decided to start an investment firm. With so many opportunities, how do you decide what mountain to climb?
What I'm really doing is
Anthony, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I took a look at your book and I knew you as kind of, I'll be honest, as like the crypto guy, as most people do. And then I dug into your story and dude, you lived like 2 or 3 lifetimes within like, what, 36 right now?
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of makes sense because I took a look at your book and in the beginning you said that you thought you were going to die at 35 and you had to accomplish all of these things. So number one, like where did that mindset come from? And how do you think it actually helped you accomplish all of these things in such a short amount of time?
Well, I think people generally just are lazy. And so they fall into kind of ruts in their life and then they pop their head up and like, I've been doing the same thing for 10, 15, 20 years. Like where'd all the time go?
Yeah.
And so for me, I always knew I had a lot of different interests. I always, for whatever reason, had a propensity for action. I really like to have some sort of speed at the things that I did, which sometimes can be impatience, but still speed rather than kind of stasis. And I lived a very kind of fast life, and not fast in, kind of too crazy, but I was in the military. I probably went and partied enough to, for a lifetime. I used to have a motorcycle I used to drive very quickly, just all the things that like a young man would do in America where you're like, I lived a good young life.
Right.
I did all those things. And so for whatever reason, I always had in the back of my head, like you can't live a fast life and live really long. And so I don't know why I picked 35. It was like seemed far away when I was like a teenager, right? But it's still short enough.
It's a random number though. And
I think I just was like probably around like 15 years old. I was like, oh, I got 20 years, right?
Okay.
Or something. So I just kept thinking 35. And so I knew, hey, look, if I actually do die at 35, like I should get a lot of stuff done. Like I should enjoy life. And when I hit 35, I was like, oh, this is all like gravy from here on out. And so hopefully I live to, 80, 90, 100, whatever the year is. But it is a great hack to say to yourself, like, what if you only had a year left? What if you only had 5 years left? What if you only had 10 years left? What are all the things you would do? Now you got to be careful because like, if you're like, hey, what if I only had a year left? Like everyone goes and quits their job tomorrow.
right? The YOLO
yeah, like literally I quit my job.
Travel the world.
I have 13 months of runway, right? Personally saved up. Like, let's see what happens.
Right.
So you want to kind of balance between, what are the like sound decisions that help you live this extraordinary life versus what are the things that are just stupid? And frankly, there's a fine line between those two things. But I do think using the framework of what if I only had 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years left in my life? What are the things I would do differently? Is a great way to kind of push yourself out of your comfort zone and kind of go chase after the things you ultimately want in life.
Yeah. It's almost like you applied, Parkinson's law, where whatever time you allowed to take over from productivity perspective, you kind of applied that to your overall lifestyle or the accomplishments that you wanted. But I think what some people might take that is they might usually take that to the other side of maybe just doing things that are fun. They're not really productive for your career. So how do you balance like figuring out whether you should live your life and also have a good career? How do you balance that?
Well, I think one of the chapters in the book is a letter to my kids about power laws. And what I explain is that everything in life is a power law. So take a single year. You may work 50 weeks of the 52 weeks, but if you take an amazing vacation for 2 weeks, you look back at that year and you're like, I remember 2024, I went to Iceland and I went in a volcano. We took a helicopter. We went in the Blue Lagoon. Like you name all this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's only 2 weeks of the whole year, but you remember the extraordinary moment. And so it's like, a very small percentage of the time, but it was so amazing that you get that power law outcome.
Right.
Everyone knows the power law in investing, kind of only 5% or so of the investments actually make up the bulk of the returns. But if you think of relationships being very similar, there's some people who want to be friends. I have 400 friends. And you're like, you don't even know their last name. That's not your friend, right?
Yeah,
it's just the guy you happen to see every time you go to the bar. But like, that's not a real friend. And so instead, the people that I respect the most in life and I think kind of are happiest are the people who may say, you know what? I don't have a lot of friends. I have 6 really, really good friends. I know everything about them. They know everything about me. Like, these are my best friends. And so again, it's a small number, but it gives you the bulk of the outcome. And so once you start to see the power law, you can see that in everything you do, whether it's how do I live an extraordinary life in terms of vacations and experiences. Maybe it's at work. One of the things at work that people always kind of mistake, the decisions you make on a day-to-day basis will not usually have a very big outcome on how good the year goes. In hindsight, at the end of the year, you can usually look back and it's like 2 decisions, 3 decisions, 1 decision. It's not, I made 365 decisions this year and like, look how the year turned out. And so you want to get the really big things right. And then you kind of want to not screw up the small things. And so once you start to see that power law, it really pushes you and say, okay, well, if I have 5 years left in my life, I don't need to go do something insane and extraordinary every single day. What are 5 things that I would do between now and when I would die? Go do those 5 things and maybe do 1 a year, or maybe it's 10 things, or maybe it's 20 things. Okay. That's 1 a quarter every year for 5 years.
Right.
Pretty manageable when you see it that way, right? Rather than, oh my God, I'm going to die in 5 years. Let's go do something insane today. Okay, tomorrow, let's go do something insane. Like, it's just not really tenable to kind of approach life that way.
Yeah, it's true. And also when I look back at like the biggest memories that I don't have like you can't even store so many memories.
Yeah, your memory's out.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you remember all of these things. Like I remember like 5 insanely great experiences when I look back in the last like 10 years or 20 years even, you can't really store all of these things. But when it comes to power laws, let's say in your everyday life, so one of the power laws you talk about was investing in Bitcoin for yourself, right? Some of these power laws, you don't really know it's going to work out until you look back at what decisions you've made before. So how can we make that more actionable for people like in their everyday lives? Like if you don't really know what decision you're going to make today that's going to become the power law for you, how can you apply the power law in business, your life, all that stuff?
Don't look at the outcome, look at the decision. I knew making a very large personal bet on Bitcoin was going to be asymmetric. I just didn't know if it was going to be up or down. Right. So like if it works, everyone's going to think I'm a genius. If it doesn't work, I'm the town idiot and I lost all my money. But I knew this is a power law decision. It is going to be one decision that is going to drive a bulk of good or bad for the next couple of years. And so you can usually identify the power law decision, you just don't know the outcome. And so same thing with the vacation. Well, I worked all year. These 2 weeks are the power law of vacation.
Yeah.
Let's go. Hopefully it goes amazing. Hopefully I come back and I'm re-energized and it's this awesome experience and all this stuff. You don't know the outcome before you go on the vacation. You just know I've identified the 2 weeks that is going to be the power law decision for my experiences for the year. Relationships are very similar. You may not know whether somebody is going to be your friend forever, but you can probably count right now, here's my 5 best friends, and these are the ones who give me the power law relationship. Now, let me go work really hard to make sure it's a positive power law, not a negative one.
Yeah, I think it kind of reminds me of, I've talked about this in the podcast before, which is, I think so much of society is telling us to add things in our lives. And I love this quote by Michelangelo where he says, I see an angel in the marble and I keep carving until I set her free. And it's one of my favorite quotes because it reminds us that we should be removing things in our lives to get the outcome that we want. Like that's there, but we're trying to always be someone else of what society tells us, or start another business when we should focus on one, or have 40 friends when we should have 4, as you mentioned. It reminds me of this like anti-to-do list that we should think about. Talk to me a little bit about that, like art of focusing so that you can do less, but using power laws, you're actually going to end up doing way more if you can find the right places to focus your energy.
I think most people just live life unintentionally. So they wake up, they do the same thing over and over again. They don't think about what they're doing. They don't ask themselves, what is the ultimate goal or the objective? They don't measure their progress towards that. And so if you're unintentional about your life, you're going to live a non-extraordinary life. But when you become intentional about it, then you can drive the outcome. And if there's one common thread throughout the entire book, it is that people have agency. And so if you think about me as a father, my wife as a mother, wanting to teach our children, there's pretty much two things that we want them to learn. If I have to pick only one, I want them to be a good decision maker, because that's a skill that can be applied to anything. How are they going to handle things at school? Good decision makers make good decisions. How are they going to handle things when somebody approaches them with drugs? Good decisions maker make good decisions. Professional life, personal life, social life, all these different aspects, if you're a good decision maker, it cuts across. And no matter what the facts are or the situation, you should more than likely end up making a good decision. So that one skill is applicable across your entire life, and it's something that is teachable. There's experience, there's logic, there's all these things that you can kind of put in front of a child that helps them become a better decision maker. So that's kind of by far number one. But the second thing that I would say that we want our kids to be able to kind of walk through is they have agency. And so if you want something, go get it. If you want something to happen, go make it happen. And if you think about society today, all we're told all the time, life sucks, everything's getting worse, you have no control, the world is happening to you, you're a victim. I don't know anyone who is highly successful who believes that, but that is the mainstream narrative. And so when you learn that you have agency, it's like you bust out of this like crazy, fake world.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you're just like, no, I'm not going to do X because you all want me to do that. I'm going to do Y because that's what I want to do. Or you start to say to yourself, okay, I'm currently in college. I want to have this type of job 5 years from now, and I want to be making a certain amount of money because I think that's important for me to build financial security, for our family, all this stuff. Okay, what are the things I need to do to get that job? There's actually not that many people who go through that, right?
Most actually break it down and reverse engineer what they should do.
It's just intentionality,
yeah.
Right? And if you're intentional and you have agency, you're unstoppable. But you have to be long-term thinking. You have to be mature. You have to be thoughtful, right? You have to have all these kind of different components to it. And so there's a lot of people who wake up and say, I'm going to be intentional today and I'm going to be high agency. Like, I'm going to be unstoppable. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Because you didn't put the work in. You didn't earn the right yet to be intentional. You didn't earn the right yet to have high agency. But if you are that type of person in a world full of people who have no intentionality and no agency, like, you will destroy them. You will get the promotion. You will get, whoever the guy or girl is that you're pursuing. You will get the social life that you want. You will get, whatever the thing is that makes you happy. But as a child, that is a very big product of environment. And so some people grow up in a situation where they are told you have agency. A lot of people are born into a situation and grow up in a situation where they're not told that. And so what you have to do is, if you can be honest with yourself and say, do I have agency? Am I intentional? If you're not, you got to hit the eject button. You got to go find the people who do have that. Who are the people who are going to change your mindset? And so it's a very weird thing to talk about, but if you want new things, you got to build new habits. But what do most people do? They sit on their couch on Friday night watching Netflix and they're like, see that person who was super successful? I watched Kobe Bryant documentary. I'm going to be successful on Monday. And they changed nothing about their life.
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're lying to yourself, right? Instead, though, if you can figure out, okay, you know what? That person is able to do something. Kobe Bryant was able to go out there and be obsessed about something. I want to be really good at learning or at business or playing a musical instrument or doing whatever. Maybe I'm a mid-level accountant that works at one of the big 4 agencies, but I'm really passionate about CrossFit. Okay. You probably should go find the best people in your area at CrossFit and go spend as much time with them as you can. You will get better.
Yeah.
Right? But what do most people do? Well, I'm going to go to Planet Fitness. No disrespect to Planet Fitness, right? But I'm going to go to Planet Fitness and I'm going to do bicep curls. I'm going to be at the CrossFit Games in 3 years.
Right.
You're lying. No, you're not. Right? And so it just goes back to, kind of there's like dreams and there's goals. And most people are full of dreams. They don't have any goals. But if you actually have goals, then the dreams become reality because you're measuring your progress towards that thing. And so it's no different than building a company or anything else, right? You never walk into the boardroom of a publicly traded company and be like, we're going to make money. They're like, okay, what's your plan? Like, we're going to make money. I have a dream, right?
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
Right.
So your personal life is no different.
Yeah. And I guess ultimately it's like taking responsibility for everything that is good in your life or anything that is potentially bad in your life. That's really the outcome there, right?
Accountability is really big. I think personal responsibility is really big. We live in a world where everyone wants to be nice to each other and no one wants to offend each other. But if you actually go and you are around the most successful people in the world, they all offend each other on purpose because they're all holding each other accountable. There's a personal responsibility. Do you think that when Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg hang out, they're just like, oh, I love how your shoes look. Oh, your hair looks so good today, right? No, they're ferociously debating the future of artificial intelligence and who's got a bigger data center.
Right. You better fix this right now.
They just got to. And again, you can do it nicely, politely, but it is this constant competition.
Yeah.
And so it's no different than, weightlifting is always the great analogy where if you go into the gym and you do 5 sets of a really low weight rep, your muscles don't grow. There was no tension. There was no, kind of breaking of them. There was no struggle or friction.
Yeah.
But if you go in and you say, I don't think I can pick up this weight, it's so heavy, and then you bang out 3 reps, and you come back the next week and you increase the weight, you do 4 reps, like eventually your muscles get bigger. Life is the same way, right? You got to do the hard things. You got to be surrounded by people who make you sharper, better, etc. And it's really just seeking out risk and competition in life will ultimately make you a better person and help you accomplish your goals.
Yeah, it makes me think that for the vast majority of the people, they're not doing enough reps and mileage, particularly. So the volume that they're putting in to actually get better or take results is significantly less than what the top 1% of winners are doing. And I think part of that is you have to build the resilience to be able to go through the pains to be able to do that. It kind of makes me think about, when I talk to people that were in the Army, there is an insane amount of resilience and work ethic that you guys have built through. Talk to me about some of the lessons you've learned through being in the Army that you perhaps would have been difficult to learn in the business world.
I think I was successful in the Army because of who I was before, which is a little bit weird.
Oh, interesting.
I grew up in a family of 5 boys. There's a lot of testosterone flying around, a lot of competition.
Right.
We were all athletic, played multiple sports in high school, and so basic training was basically a joke. Like it was just fun, right? I literally remember the drill sergeants would call me and another guy over whenever they would see another drill sergeant, and they would just be like, just drop. Like not even like do 20, just keep going. And then we just sit there and I'm 17 years old, right? Like I just banging them out and I'm like laughing. Like this is hilarious to me. And they were like proud. They were like basically like these shitheads of mine are better than your shitheads, right? Like look at how many push-ups they can do. And it almost became this thing of like, you can't break me, right? And I don't even think you're trying to, like you're trying to show off. And so when you have that mentality, it's just like the physical nature wasn't really that bad. And frankly, I was 17. I actually think I would have a harder time going through basic training today in my mid 30s with a small degree of success, because if they were yelling at me, do I have the humility to just pop down and do push-ups? Or would I be like, why are you talking to me like that?
Right. The ego comes out, right?
Yeah. And everyone says, oh, I don't have the ego, whatever. But like, it's very hard to find any degree of success in anything you do and not have an element of that. And so you have to constantly try to kill that ego. But at 17 years old, you haven't earned the right to have an ego. You're literally just an idiot 17-year-old. And so it was much, much easier for me to go through it at that point.
Yeah.
Now, what I will say is after the basic training and all that stuff, there's 2 things that I really took from the military. One, I was very fortunate. I got to go to a number of leadership schools. And one in particular that I remember was a dedicated leadership school. So a lot of these leadership schools, it's kind of like, hey, you go to a course or a training program and they may have like a day on leadership, right? This was specifically focused on leadership in the infantry. And so I remember going to this and it was just very clear. Like the military does a great job of reinforcing the idea that everything comes before you. If you are the leader, if you're the sergeant of a team, they eat before you do. Because what happens if the food runs out? What happens if all of a sudden you guys got to run back out there, right? They eat, you take care of them, and then you take care of yourself. There's a great book called The Mission, the Men, and Me, written by Pete Blabber. Pete is a former Delta Force commander. He's one of the first guys on the ground in Afghanistan. And literally the title of the book is The Mission, the Men, and Me. Guess what comes first? The mission. Guess what comes second? The men. And last is him. right? As the leader, he comes last. And so it's very different than the kind of chest beating, arrogant belief of a lot of business leaders. I'm the CEO, I'm the whatever.
Yeah.
The military is actually reversed. And people think that's weird because guess what? There's a hierarchy. Literally, you walk around with a rank on your chest. But the leaders know they come last. And so they may have authority, but really they're there in service.
Right.
And so that was a huge lesson for me, and going through those schools and kind of seeing it on display was really important. The second thing is it's dangerous, right? Yeah. And so again, I was 20 when I deployed overseas. I probably was too stupid to realize that it was really dangerous. It's kind of just like,
why did you join in the first place though?
I think that 9/11 had a huge part of it. I was in 8th grade when that happened. And I vividly remember that moment. I remember the conversation with my father when I went home that night. I think that in a weird way, Pat Tillman had a huge impact on it. For those that don't know, Pat played college football. He then was playing for the Arizona Cardinals. He turned down an NFL contract to go into the military after 9/11. And I remember saying to myself, like, I'm going to go play college football. I have all this great opportunity. Like, if he could do it and walk away from millions of dollars, like, why can't I try to figure out both? And so I think that was pretty impactful. And then I think the third thing was also just like, can I do it? One of the greatest marketing campaigns in the world is every elite military unit says, you're not good enough. That's the marketing. You're not good enough. And it speaks to specifically men that are usually in those units. Usually women are not allowed in those units. There's a lot of idiots out there who say, I can do it. Right?
Yeah.
And the truth is that only 10% of them actually can do it.
Right.
But a lot of people showed up and tried.
Interesting.
And so they're like anti-selling. Right. And so if you even look at, although the Marines, they got their own issues, Army's obviously better, but for the Marines, the few, the proud.
Yeah.
Right. The few. Do you want to be part of this, kind of multi-generational excellence? Certain group of person very drawn to that.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you look at kind of all these different military kind of units and the marketing, all stuff, well, when you get in, it isn't for everybody. Right. And so one of the things that was weird was I joined in 2006. I got out in 2012, spent 6.5 years in the military. And I frankly had a pretty watered down experience. Right. I was able to go to college. I got deployed in the middle of college. I went back to college. And so, sure, I got deployed, but it's not like I was sitting for 4, 8, 12, 20 years on a military base, not deployed. Right. It was kind of like almost the soldier's dream. You don't have to do stuff every day until it's time to go, test yourself. And then you come back and you don't got to do stuff every day. But at that time, they really needed people, right? They were giving out signing bonuses when I signed up. And they were also starting to think about lowering the standards. And then while I was in, they started to lower the standards. And so now all of a sudden you realize, like, I'm walking around Taji, Iraq, 12 miles north of Baghdad. And I see a dude, he's just fat. And I say to myself, if that guy is out there with me, he's going to get one of us killed. Because what happens if he gets hit and we can't pick him up? Or what happens if I get hit and he's got to come get me? Does he have the stamina? Does he have the endurance? Does he have the strength to come and do it? And so one of the things about the military is it's all about what you do for yourself is actually what you're doing for everybody else. Did you clean your weapon? It's not for you. If you cleaned your weapon, hopefully it'll fire when somebody else needs you. Did you eat healthy? Did you work out? Did you do the things you're supposed to do? Because when your buddy's laying out there in the middle of the floor and bullets are flying, are you going to go out there and get them? Can you physically do it? Can you carry the equipment to do your job? So it's all these things that you do to yourself, but really it's so that the team is cohesive. And so you walk away with this great lesson where you say, look, this stuff's really hard, but you're doing it inside of a team. And I control my input. And if everyone else controls their input, that's how you get excellence.
Yeah.
Right? Is every single person is kind of responsible for themselves. And so it's this great idea of not only are you learning leadership, you're learning teamwork. And the resilience makes the team really formidable. Because now all of a sudden everyone realizes, you know what? We've been through a lot of training. We've been through a lot of tough things. That sucked. But it's not the Navy SEALs. But it's hard enough. And now all of a sudden, if all of us come together, we probably can handle a lot of different situations because we've tested each other.
Yeah.
And that's really what the military is good at doing.
No, that's a great lesson. I mean, the idea of, because the consequences of not taking care of yourself is so high when it comes to the Army and going to the war. How did you transfer that to business life and making sure that the employees and the people that you have around you have that lesson kind of instilled without obviously making it about going to the army or getting killed if you're not holding up your part of the deal? How do you enforce that as a leader and motivate people that are in your team?
There are no business problems. There's only people problems.
Yeah.
Right?
I hear you.
And it all comes down to leadership. And sometimes leadership is knowing when to fire someone. Sometimes leadership is knowing when to try to course correct someone. Sometimes leadership is knowing when to let someone kind of drown on their own a little bit under all their work and realize this is the equivalent of the resilience. This is the equivalent of the toughness that they got to pick up on themselves. Sometimes the leadership is knowing when to kick someone in the ass and say, hey, you're screwing up right now. You're letting the team down. Here's how you got to get back on track, right? It's not just one type of leadership. The interesting thing about the Army coming out of there, it's all about authoritative leadership, right? I'm a sergeant, you're not, do what I say. Business world doesn't operate like that. Sure, there's a CEO or whatever, but it's much more influential leadership. And so when I went to Facebook, I had a bunch of people that worked on my team, but none of them reported to me. So the engineers reported to the engineering manager, right? The growth analytics person, they reported to their manager. I was the product manager. So it brought together all these different disciplines onto a product team to try to build something. Yeah. And so I can try to influence what the engineers do, but I can't say like, hey, do this or you get fired. They don't report to me. And so you have to be very good at the influential leadership. And so it forces you to figure out a different way of leading. And so, yeah, you can do the authoritative thing, but you can also do the influential thing. And having the range to go back and forth between these is pretty important. And then it's just reps, right? Understanding how to run a team really comes down to just what have you seen before? And I think that's why so many people who run teams or companies are constantly seeking out other people who run teams and companies, because they're like, I don't want to have to go through every single situation possible to learn every single, outcome possible. I'd love to just call up my friends and be like, hey, here's the situation. I got 2 decisions. What would you do if you're me? And hopefully they say, you know what? I just had that situation 6 months ago. Let me tell you how I thought about it. Here's the decision I made. And here's so far the outcome. 80% confidence. This is the thing I would do if I was in your seat.
Got it.
Perfect. And so I do think that it's not just about what do you learn, but again, if you kind of level up and have a good group of people around you, then it's also what do they learn? Because if you have good friends and you guys kind of operate and work together, then everything they learn, you should be learning, and vice versa. Yeah. And so now you have a collective knowledge base that is very different than somebody who's kind of like a solo person who's trying to figure it out all on their own.
I'm going to go back to your timeline of the story after you got you got out of the Army, you went to Facebook, you started a couple companies, you went to Facebook, and then there was a low point in your life where I think it was after Snap, you were going through some litigation stuff, and you were kind of lost. You went back to North Carolina. I think everybody's had those like low points in their lives, but you decided to, eventually start an investment firm, right? Is that the next thing that you did? How do you decide what mountain to climb? Because with so many opportunities today for most people, obviously we talked about the power law in the beginning of this conversation, that you have to pick the right thing to make sure that you're putting leverage in the right place. But there's so many opportunities. So how did you, and even today, how do you decide what are the right mountains to climb? What questions do you ask yourself? What are the frameworks that you use?
I just go with my intuition now. Okay. And so it's funny because I talk about being intentional.
Yeah.
But my intentionality is to trust my gut. I've seen now enough experiment, outcome. Do not discount my intuition. And so if something is pulling me in a certain area, I follow it. And that is really how I pick the mountains. Because to me, it's not about trying to pick the biggest mountain anymore, right? I've had enough success in my life where I'm confident that I have a skill set that if you took everything away, put me anywhere in the world, I'll be back. Give me 2-3 years, I'll be back, right? And actually, in a crazy mental experiment, I might be better and bigger because I don't have the legacy infrastructure issues, kind of assets, et cetera. Right. And so if you think about it from that perspective, what I'm really doing is I'm trying to satisfy what that intuition is. I'm trying to satisfy what that interest is. And so as you kind of follow that stuff, you're saying to yourself, I don't actually know. I was just on a call with somebody and I told him, I said, I've got this interest. I think there's a business here. I'm trying to figure it out. This guy is super successful, ran 2 publicly traded companies in that industry. And he looked at me and he said, is it worth your time? And I said, yeah, but I'm not measuring my time in dollars. It's not about how much money could I make. Is it worth my time? It's I have an intellectual interest. It's an itch. I need to scratch it, right? I think that there's something here. And his question should stop me because it's probably not worth my time and dollars. But I know that if I don't do it, or if I don't at least pursue it and underwrite, should I do this or not, I'll regret it. And so you got to kind of follow that intuition. And that's how I pick mountains now. Now, it's unfair of me to say that for people who are starting out in their career, because if I had done that early in my career, I don't know, I'd be like sitting on the beach in Venice Beach or something, like on, like the pull-up bars.
My gut tells me I should probably get a six-pack and
I don't know.
Go to the best Hollywood
nice.
parties.
Yeah, my gut says the sun's nice today.
Tells me.
No, I mean, look, I was very, very driven in terms of I want to be successful. And at different points in my life, there were different things that I kind of saw as like the target. But it was clear to me that I was willing to put in the work. I tell a story all the time that when I got hired at Facebook, it literally is because I read a book. Like, I'm not joking. It's not me exaggerating. Facebook recruiter called me. He had been at Google. He'd moved over to Facebook. I talked to him before, calls me, says, hey, they're hiring for a product manager. Are you interested? I just sold my second company. And it was kind of like a fake celebration. It was like enough where it's like, oh, we sold the company, but like I definitely didn't make enough money to like not work anymore
or something.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just like, again, I shouldn't complain because it was better than my friends who went and got jobs. Sure. But also, if your aspirations are what mine were, like you're like, damn, I can't figure this out. Like I'm frustrated. So he's like, why don't you come out here? You can learn here. Okay, that's interesting. And I flew out there and he told me a product manager. I had no clue what a product manager was when he called me. And I was like Googling on, whatever. And so I went online. I was like, what's product manager? I'm reading blogs, all this stuff. And there was a book that was mentioned like 3 or 4 times, The Art of Product Management. I forget who wrote it. And I bought the Kindle version of it and I got on the plane. And by the time I landed, I'd read the whole book.
Wow.
And now it's a long flight, right? Yeah. From North Carolina to
fast-ass reader.
to San Francisco. But I read the whole book. And I remember then I said, okay, I got to go back and I got to try to take some notes. And I remember literally going to the hotel and the interview was the next day. And I started, clicking through the ebook, right? And I'm like trying to like write myself notes on the drive over there. I'm like reading the notes that I had taken from the day before. And I'm just trying to like, oh, dude, I got to figure out what a product manager is. And I walk in and the way that the interviews work, you talk to a couple of different people. And I remember I got in one specific interview and in hindsight, knowing what I know about the interview process from the other side, like this person is supposed to be evaluating me as a product manager. And they kept firing questions. And I'm like, there must be a hidden camera in here. This guy just teed up. Like, I just read in the book, right? Like, this is like, I know exactly what a product manager does,
probably
right?
got the questions from the book.
Yeah, like literally, right? And so, I just regurgitated everything in that book. And thankfully, they also do kind of a culture fit interview. They do some other stuff, right? And I was able to kind of navigate those and hopefully, not make too big of a fool of myself. I got the job. And so just recently this year, there's a business that we are thinking about going into. And somebody in our office came up to me and they said, I got to ask you a question. I saw a book in your office. I said, well, which book? I got a bunch of books in my office. They said, you bought X for Dummies. And I just read it cover to cover. I said, listen, if this is the industry, there's literally a book called X for Dummies. I'm a dummy right now, right? Like this book was written for me. Let me go read it. And so I just went and I started reading it. And there were things I understood and were like pretty simple. And there were things I had no clue about. Do it. I'd go look it up. I'd do whatever. It took about a week and a half. And so now I had a baseline knowledge. I started talking to people in the industry and I realized I may know more than some of these people. How is it that you worked in this industry for 10 years, but they don't know some of the basics? Well, the only reason I know is because I read the book, right? I put the work in to go do it. Now it's one book. It's not like I'm some genius or expert, but what I realized was like most of these people are full of shit. And I started asking very specific questions that I knew what the answers were.
Right.
And they kind of just give you this like hand wavy answer. Okay, I'm gonna discount everything else you said in this conversation a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so it is this weird thing where, I'll give you another example. I don't even think I've ever said this publicly or he knows that I even know this, but Mark Cuban in 2016, 2017, he had somebody who worked with him who I knew and Jason Williams, one of my business partners, knew. And that's how Jason and I met, was this guy that introduced us. I remember reaching out to him one day and saying, what are you guys working on? What's interesting to you guys right now? And he literally was like, Mark's got me reading a bunch of white papers about artificial intelligence. Mark is also reading these white papers about machine learning. 2016.
Wow.
Guy's a billionaire, and he's reading the white papers about how machine learning and neural networks and all this stuff works.
Crazy. That's when OpenAI started, right? 2016.
Whenever, just like
that time, yeah.
Before people cared about AI, here's somebody who's super successful, never got to work another day in his life. He's reading technical white papers on neural networks. And you're sitting there and you're saying to yourself, like, at the time I was like, could I do that? Do I have the discipline and the focus, the energy and the aspiration to spend time reading the technical paper on neural networks so I can maybe find an investment? Maybe I'll start a company in the space. You see that, you're like, hey man, that's what I'm competing with. How do you compete with a billionaire that's willing to read the technical papers? It's pretty hard. This game's pretty competitive.
Pretty tough,
right?
Even at that age, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's just, look, you got to do the work. And I think that's the thing that really separates a lot of the super successful people from everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, at the root of it, it seems you have this insane amount of curiosity. I don't know if that's something you instilled in yourself from your parents, or you just were already like that. But I think that's an important thing. Like, how do you instill that in your kids, and how would you teach people that? Can you teach curiosity? Because I feel like that's one of the most the core skill that you will need in the information age, where you can have all the information you want. You just need to be curious and asking the right questions.
I don't know if you can teach curiosity, but you can feed it.
Okay.
What I mean by that is I probably am more curious than maybe your average person. Ask questions. People answer them. Whether it was my parents, people in my life, teachers, whatever, the internet. Oh, I can just ask a question, somebody gives me the answer. Let me ask another one. Let me ask another, right? And it's just like this positive feedback loop. And so you just keep asking. And then you realize, I mean, my wife hates this. A lot of my friends are like, dude, please stop. I'll go to dinner with someone, and if it's somebody I don't know, and they do something interesting, like there's one guy in particular, he's the co-founder of a very, very popular movie studio. And he's a young guy, right? He's like about my age. And he happened to sit down next to me at dinner once, maybe 8 people there. And I just grilled him. For 40 minutes probably. I asked him every question I could think about the industry, about why they make certain decisions, what movies get greenlit, which ones don't, what are the economics, how do they find investors, how do they think about operating inside the company, why did they raise money from certain investors, what were the terms, I mean, just everything.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, this guy is an expert at this.
Right. Did you see him again, or is he like, no, I don't want to see this guy
I see him again, and by the way, guess what? He loves to talk about it, right?
Okay,
like he's like, dude, I nobody ever wants to talk to me about, financing of films or, all stuff, whatever.
Strokes his ego a little bit too, right?
Of course. And I'm like super just like, I've learned if you really want somebody to give you answers to things, just be like, hey, you're an expert. I'm dumb. I'm going to ask really stupid questions.
Right.
Fire away, right? And you've given yourself the cover of like, I know I'm going to ask dumb questions. If they're too stupid, you don't have to answer.
Right.
They answer them all, right? And then I recently went to a conference overseas, and I was standing in the green room, and a guy walked in. I knew who he was. He's very famous, multi-billionaire, a number of different industries over his life, kind of an older guy now. And most of the people in the room did not know who he was. And so I was standing there, and he was standing in a group of people. And I was like, man, I really want to talk to this guy. I don't know how long he's going to be here. Maybe he's going to leave in 2 minutes, whatever. And so there's also an element of just like, you got to have some balls, man.
Yeah.
And it's an acquired skill because it's very uncomfortable. But I just said to myself, like, I will regret forever if I stood in this room 5 feet from this guy and I did not talk to him. And so rather than go approach him, I said his name out loud and I said, can you come here for a second?
What?
And he walked, I mean, it was, again, it's a green room. There's maybe 10 people there, right? So it's not like I'm like at a big party or anything.
Yeah,
right?
like screaming his name. Yeah.
No, but he walked over. I was standing there with my brother and I said, my name is so-and-so. This is my brother. I have a couple questions. Can I ask? And he was like, sure. And I hit him with a question about like one of the first companies he ever owned. And you could just tell he was like, oh, this dude not only knows who I am, he actually knows about a lot of things that I've done.
Yeah.
And so I just started asking him question after question after question to the point where he literally goes, hey man, maybe you should be the one interviewing me up there on stage.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, you can go back to like your friends or what, like, it was kind of like, all right, that's enough. But it was just this thing of like, maybe he thinks it's weird. Maybe he's going to walk out of there and be like, man, that guy asked me a lot of questions. But the odds that I would ever see that guy and get to ask him those questions is so small that it's irresponsible of me not to get the answers.
Yeah.
And so I just asked and asked and asked and asked. And then when he left, guess what? Every single person in that room was like, yo, what's that guy's story? I said, well, let me explain this guy. And he actually has like a crazy story.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, damn. And I'm like, yeah, by the way, I only knew like half of what I just told you guys because he just told me the other half. Right? I knew the headline of the story. He just told me the details. And so it's that constant attitude of just like, look, I don't care. Like, I want to learn, right? And by the way, if you judge me, if you think I'm stupid for trying to learn, like, you're probably just not gonna be my friend.
Right.
And so just be like shameless about learning. And what that does is, again, it's the curiosity. They feed your curiosity. So you ask more and more questions and they'll tell you. If they're tired of answering questions, they'll just be like, hey man, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go over here. Okay.
Yeah, in the book, you also talk about there are different mentors and people that you admire that you met. Like one of them was Robert Kiyosaki, where after the interview, you just straight up like asked like, how can I be helpful? And I would imagine like, as easy as that question is, not many people actually ask him that question. Like the percentage of people that actually do the simple things to be able to build that relationship and to add value to someone's life is pretty slim, right? So is that generally the way when you're trying to surround yourself or trying to meet other people that you're trying to meet? Is it just really about asking questions and the right questions, like adding value that people aren't doing yet?
I think asking questions definitely helps, but it's like just being genuine. I mean, it blows my mind that Robert and I became friends. Blows my mind. I will never forget, I was 20 years old, sitting in the desert in Iraq, and I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I remember being like, oh my God, this is a portal into a whole world I didn't even know existed,
here, man. Yeah.
right? And like a lot of people in finance will like look down like, oh, this friggin' personal finance book, whatever. Like that book has changed lives. The #1 personal finance book in history, sold tens of millions of copies and changed people's lives. To then now, fast forward 15 years to be friends with him, text with him, all this stuff, and still be learning from him is incredible. And so one, like your life can change real fast, right? But two is, I think he just honestly realized this guy actually wants to learn. Like he's not here. Like I had no ask in terms of like, do this for me, do that, do like whatever. It was just like, I genuinely want to help you as a thank you for you helping me through the book.
Yep.
And then it was really the second conversation where I think he was like, oh, like this guy's gonna like, he like came prepared to the meeting. Oh, this guy like, he's like serious. And then that's what really I think kind of started the whole thing. And so don't be weird about it. Like, I put it in the books and every single person I meet with, it's like artificial, like, how can I help you? Right. And you're just like, dude, I
heard that before.
Thank you. Right. Thank you.
Yes.
But like, you're just asking because you think you're supposed to ask. Right. It's kind of like I call it like a blog post founder. You go read all the YC blogs and then you just go regurgitate everything in the meeting. By the way, that's how I got a job at Facebook.
Right,
so like it can work, but investors' job is to figure out like who's bullshitting and who's not. So same thing here is like just genuinely be like, hey, how can I help you? And it's even better. I didn't have anything that I thought I could explicitly help Robert and his team with. But in hindsight, like I should have been like, hey, Robert, like I see on social you guys are posting more than you were maybe a couple of weeks ago. It seems like you guys are really trying to figure this out. I think I've got a couple of ideas of how you guys could improve. Like who on your team should I talk to?
Right.
Right. Like come with a suggestion as to what to do and just be genuine about it. Right. I don't think I have ever asked Robert for a single thing. Like he gave me everything I needed. I read the book. Right. And so now it's this beautiful thing where like I get to learn from him. Learning is the reward.
Is the reward, yeah.
Right.
And he probably enjoys sharing it.
He loves it.
Yeah.
Right. And every once in a while he'll text me something that's a little out there about, the economy or whatever. Right. And I'm just like, this guy's passionate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if him and I vehemently disagree on something, doesn't matter. Right. It's just like, I know where he's coming from. He knows where I'm coming from. And, he's always done right by me. He's never had to do it. And it's been this like incredible experience for me. And probably more so than anything, the thing I take away from it is not any one piece of knowledge he gave me. It's that like, look at how kind someone that successful could be to someone who didn't really have anything to offer to him.
Yeah.
Man, I should be able to do that for other people.
Totally. And there's something about having a relationship with that person where they believe in you and it gives you that permission to think bigger. When you don't have anyone around you, at least within the relationship, like a personal relationship, you're really kind of confined to your own network. And I feel like if you can find someone that can at least give you some sort of permission that gives you the permission to think bigger, I feel like that's really one of the key things. There are certain people in my life as well, and I'm sure like that's kind of how you're continuing to think bigger and be more ambitious as well.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
I'm going to quote some things from the book that I really liked, some of the tweets that you have as well before we go. Carve your ethics in stone, but write your opinions in sand. I fucking love that. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Changing your mind is a sign of intelligence unless it is changing your mind on an ethical decision. And so in order to know when it's okay to change your mind versus not, you have to have a framework. And so my framework is, if it's an ethical decision throughout your entire life, regardless of the situation, you should always make the same decision. If it is a opinion-based decision, then you should evaluate all of the facts and then make a decision, and changing your mind should be derived by what the current facts are, regardless of what the past was. And so understanding the difference between those two things is pretty important, because what you don't want to do is be very rigid in your thinking of your opinions and then constantly flip-flopping on your ethical beliefs, right? And so again, carving your ethics in stone, they don't move. But writing your opinions in sand almost on a daily basis, they wash away, and you got to rewrite them. And so really understanding the difference between those two things is important.
Yeah, I think there's a few things there, because if you can carve your ethics in stone, there's just less things for you to even think about when you're bombarded by all of these decisions, what project and what product decision you need to make. It's just, there's less decisions, first of all. But I think the key thing is that most people aren't willing to change their opinions. That's really where people get stuck, right? They're not afraid. They're afraid to, from a political perspective, like look at the other side, or from someone else's perspective that they may not like. They're not willing to go beyond the confines of their own world, right? So I think that's a key one. It's like people are just not willing to, especially with like social media algorithms today, they're not able to see the other side of things.
Well, it's also, are you willing to change your mind in public? And are you willing to hold to your ethics in public? Right? So the public component magnifies both of those.
Yeah.
And so it's very hard for people to change their mind publicly, take a very hard stance on something, get new information, now change. Because you know that there's going to be pain. But are you pursuing truth, or are you trying to appease a random follower on the internet?
Yeah.
It's hard. Probably more hard. Are you willing to stand up for your ethics in public, even if it will bring you personal pain? Very hard to do. And so those two things in private are hard enough. Doing them in public, is that on steroids?
What's something you've had to change your mind about in public?
There's a lot of stuff I changed my mind about, but I feel like I change my mind like almost every week now.
Today I changed my mind?
Yeah. No, I think that, a good example is like something like Bitcoin, where, I used to be of the belief that Bitcoin is going to be this global reserve currency in, 10 years. Like, it's just going to happen. Now I'm of the belief that I think Bitcoin is going to be the greatest store of value available to people with internet access. And it's going to serve as this great store of value and continue to compound in dollar terms at an attractive rate. But you shouldn't spend your Bitcoin. So if you go back, you will literally see me have tweets that are like, you should spend your Bitcoin. And then you'll see tweets that are like, you should not spend your Bitcoin. Those two things both can't be true, right?
Sure.
And so it's just this belief that like, oh, wait a second, like I understand it more, right? And so, it's kind of like if you do 100 hours of work, you kind of sort of understand something. If you do 1,000 hours, now you feel like actually you're in danger, because like now you're like, oh, I'm an expert. And it's not until you do 10,000 do you look back and you say, hey, when I only had 1,000 hours of experience, how stupid was I?
Yeah.
Right? And so like you got to kind of continue that pursuit and not take your foot off the gas and, kind of pursuing curiosity.
Yeah, and I think most people would probably delete those tweets, but the fact that you're able to, despite how painful it is, like to be transparent with your opinions.
There's a lot of tweets that still exist, and every once in a while people will go and they'll find them, and they, I always love it. They think they're like Lewis and Clark. They like found some new tweet that no one's ever seen before. I'm like, guys, that tweet has literally gone viral again and again and again, and I'm going to leave it there. Like that, on that day, at that time, that's what I believed. By the way, I was wrong. And sometimes I'll just like respond. I'll be like, yeah, that was really stupid, thought process. And people are like mind blown. They're like, you are willing to say publicly that something you said in the past was stupid. I'm like, objectively it was stupid, right? Like this isn't my opinion. If you look at this thing, that was dumb. And so it's just like, am I trying to be intellectually honest with myself, or am I trying to appease some random person on the internet? And so I think that that's really the thing is I almost look at the public magnification as it holds me honest.
Yeah, I respect that. I think a lot of people, the right people will respect that, right? I think that's really matters.
Well, or they'll just be like, look at this dumbass. What did he believe in 2016, right?
Come on. The other one that I really liked was right now what you're working on or the relationship that you're in feels like you're going to be in that for the rest of your life. But it's really only a stepping stone to what your next big thing is going to be. That really hit home for me because I've been working on my company for 3-4 years. It feels like forever, when you're in the trenches, and you think you're going to continue to work on that for the rest of your life. But it's really a stepping stone for what the next big thing is. And same thing with the relationships, as you mentioned. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Today is practice for tomorrow. And the beauty is you don't know you're practicing.
Yeah.
So, relationships is an easy one. When you're in high school and you get a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you think we're going to get married, obviously. Like high school sweethearts. I've read about it, in books. I saw it in the movies. And then like a year later, you're like, I can't stand that person, right? But when you go into the next relationship, you've learned a little bit about yourself and you learned a little bit about what you're looking for in a partner. And then that next relationship, you're like, oh my God, this is it. And then you get into your third relationship and you're like, oh, you know what? I'm a little bit smarter than I was before the second relationship. And so you're practicing in a weird way and learning about yourself and about what you're looking for in a partner that eventually when you find it, right? Same thing is true, let's say with work. The first company I ever saw, I literally thought like Mark Zuckerberg, he's going to run his company forever. Look at Bill Gates. Look at we're just going to run this company forever. Within 12 months, maybe I'm even giving myself credit for sticking with it that long. I was like, I don't think I can work on this for another 6 months, right? Like forget the rest of my life. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And so when I started the second company, I implemented a bunch of things based on what I had learned with the first company. Then I went to Facebook and there was a bunch of things that I had learned in the first two companies that I started to implement on the teams at Facebook.
Yeah.
But you know what's crazy? When I deployed to Iraq, that was practice for running a team at Facebook, right? And so growing up in a family of 5 boys was practice for the Army, which was practice for Facebook, which was practice for investing. It all just builds on itself. It's all this huge learning that happens. And so if you keep that in mind, it's like today is important. The best people, Kobe Bryant goes to practice and he's like, I'm literally going to destroy people today. He treats it just like a game, hyper competitive, hyper serious, right? Just constantly working, but it's still practice. And later in the game, he's then like, I'm glad I practiced that hard. And so it doesn't mean take your foot off the gas. What it means is, play it like it's the Super Bowl. Play it like it's the NBA championship. But understand that in hindsight, you're probably going to look at a lot of stuff you're doing today as practice.
Yeah. And in some ways, it puts less pressure on yourself as well, right?
Of course.
You can make the mistakes as you want, but still give it your all because it's going to be the stepping stone for what you want to do after.
The beauty is that there are no games in business, right? And so you can mess up in a meeting and it counts to a degree, but you get to come back right back this afternoon and do another meeting, right? It really sucks for an NFL player. You get to only play so many games, and at the end of the season ends.
Yeah,
you might get cut, you might get traded, right? You might get injured. Like it's a whole different mentality. In business, you just get to go right back at it, and so it's just constant practice to get better for the next one.
Yeah,
which hopefully is puts people's mind at ease.
Last question around health. I saw a tweet that it's been 3 years, maybe over 3 years, that you stopped drinking alcohol. What was the kind of the root of that decision, and how has it affected you? Business, life, health, energy?
Yeah, it'll be 4 years in a couple months. It's probably one of the better decisions that I've made in the last 4 years. I have a lot of friends who are like, this crazy night convinced me to stop drinking, or this super sad story, or, I went to AA and, whatever. That wasn't me, thankfully. I think like everyone, I was just, during the pandemic, locked at home, 5 o'clock would come, I would drink like a glass of wine and do that for long enough. Like when January 1st of 2021 came, I just said to myself, I just want to go 30 days and not drink. Like, I just think I'll feel better, right? It's not like I'm dying to drink every day or like there's any issues or anything. It's just like, I think that if I go 30 days and don't drink, I will feel better as a person. And at the end of 30 days, I felt better. And I said, well, why don't I do it for another 30 days? And by the end of February of 2021, I said, I'm never going to drink again. And I have my personality is very much like, there's no in between. There's no like, extreme, I'm going to do one drink a weekend. Like, nah, one is going to be 50, right? Or whatever, right? Like, very much it is, I don't drink or I drink. And so in hindsight, again, the whole like James Clear, like how do you create habits? How do you do this stuff? I just started telling people, unbeknownst to me, that how effective it was. Like, I don't drink. And once I told my friends that, they didn't ask me to drink, right? Like, it was just like, oh, he doesn't drink. And these are friends who like, we drink a lot.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, I just met them and, I had never drank with them before. And so, very nice of my friends to kind of be accepting of that and understanding. But I do think there was just an element of like, hey, I don't drink. And now I can't imagine getting drunk and waking up with a hangover. I got kids, I got shit to do, whatever. And so I don't judge the people who do drink. I think that, I drink plenty. Like I got my lifetime full before 35 type thing.
You're past that stage.
Yeah. But no, but it's been a great decision. And probably the area where I've seen the biggest impact is sleep. I just sleep better. And so, if you sleep well, then you're in good shape.
Yeah. It's kind of it's also, BJ Fogg, Tiny Habits. That's a great book. It talks about how if you want to start flossing, start with one tooth. And it seems like that's what you did. You started with 30 days and then that just kind of built up from there because you've seen it wasn't like intimidating when you first started. It wasn't like you said you were going to cut drinking out for the rest of your life in January. You started with 30 days.
Yeah.
And then you kind of started
I will, let me tattle on myself a little bit. I gave up coffee last year. So I was like, hey, I'm a big dog. I gave up alcohol. Haven't drank, never going to drink again in my life. You know what the last beast is going to be coffee.
Yeah.
And so I did it in like October or so. That was the hardest one.
Yeah.
2 weeks, my wife was ready to murder me. Just like irritable, not a pleasant person to be around. As hard as I tried, like I told her, I said, hey, this is going to be a rough week, whatever. She's like, week? It's like 2 weeks. You were, just an asshole all the time, whatever. And so it's a drug for sure, right?
Yeah. You had heavy withdrawals, like you were sweating.
Now I say all that and I brag about that I got off coffee, look at my willpower or whatever. I had 2 cappuccinos today. That shit tastes good. So, you
we're not perfect, guys.
Yeah, well, you just gotta pick. Like, it's like I know that I can stop drinking it, but I just really like the taste of it.
Sure.
And so, like, it's almost like now it's become this like indulgence of mine. Now, if I drink more than 2, like, okay, maybe I'm addicted again. But like, it's just I enjoy it, and so I don't want to live a life where I don't enjoy it at all. So there's kind of this balance between, are you doing things for your health? But you're like living this really strict life and then you don't enjoy it. Like that's not fun. And so, if I'm going to have a vice to drink a cappuccino every day, like probably not the end of the world.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, man. I know we're out of time here, so I want to make sure people check out the book. Is there a physical copy here? There we go. Physical copy here, How to Live an Extraordinary Life. Where else can people find you online?
Twitter. Just go to A Pompliano on Twitter and I got plenty of thoughts there.
Yeah. Even the old ones, right?
All of them are there.
Yeah. All right, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect.